Thank you, Robin. Does this thing work? I think she said pretty much everything, so thank you for coming. I need my notes. You can roll up the top of your head. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you this morning to talk about the early days of Cape Coral. Okay, sorry. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. But when I look at the world today, well, the past in general is a special place for me. I first became interested in the early development of Cape Coral by accident. I was jogging down by Tarpon Point. That was a long time ago. I don't do much jogging anymore. At the time, it was just a small little boat basin. And on the side of the road, there was a large hill. There were no hills in Cape Coral at the time, and I was curious. And one day I decided to investigate. So I climbed the hill. And when I looked down, I was amazed at what I saw. It looked like the ruins of an old amphitheater. There were in-ground planters and brick walkways with crumbling walls and a large stadium-style seating area around a dry basin that I later learned was a porpoise pool. And everything was overgrown with a lot of vegetation. At one point, a fox screamed in front of me. Well, I was fascinated, and I decided I wanted to come back and videotape my discovery. I was in my studio at the video transfer station about a month later, fiddling with the video, and a woman came in, a customer of mine, and she was a member of the Historical Society. And when she saw the video, she said it looked like it might be the old rose gardens. She said if I was interested in the early development of Cape Coral, I should get Eileen Bernard's book, Lies That Came True. Well, I did, and I was hooked. I had the privilege of getting to know Miss Bernard during the production of Castles. She was as witty and feisty when I met her as she was back in 1958. That's when the Rosens hired her to help type letters, replies to questions sent in by hundreds of prospective buyers. I decided that I wanted to tell that story, the incredible story of the Rosen brothers, in a documentary format. Over the next few years, I collected tons of material, videos, films, brochures, contacts. And in 2004, with the support of Elmer Tabor, Gloria Tate, Paul Sanborn, and others, I was able to begin production. I spent a year working on the documentary, conducting interviews. At one point, I flew up to New York, and I spent the afternoon on the Upper West Side with Linda Sterling, who was the daughter of Leonard Rosen. She was very gracious. She was sitting on the board of the Guggenheim Museum at the time. And she was so gracious that as she recalled her memories of her father and her Uncle Jack, I munched away on the homemade pastry she offered. Yeah. Well, in 2005, when the video was finished, the city held a premiere at City Hall. And they presented me with a very nice plaque. I meant to bring it, congratulating me on completing the documentary. I never thought I would. Now I'm here talking to the new Residents Club. If the original developers of this city, Leonard and Jack Rosen, could see all of you here right now, I'm sure they would be justifiably proud. But they'd probably try to sell you some more property. That's what they did. They were dreamers. And they assembled a team of incredible sales geniuses and a project manager, Kenny Schwartz, the project engineer, Tom Weber, who was a great, great man. Robin, you probably read about all these people. Anyway, these fellows helped them to achieve that dream. It was a dream that nobody thought was possible at the time. To take a piece of tropical wilderness, I won't call it a swampland, and create a city unlike any other at the time. Is this lasting you? Yeah. Lasting you. I'm sure you've heard Cape Coral referred to as a waterfront wonderland. the Venice of Florida. Robin just reminded you of that. That's because of our massive canal system, which we wouldn't have if we wouldn't have the houses here without the canals, because the land was too low. They had to dredge the canals. The canals were an afterthought. They needed the land to build up, to put the houses on, and that's how we got our canals, thank God. But our popularity is also enhanced by our close proximity to some of the most beautiful tropical locales of the world. Sanibel, Captiva, Marco Island, Cayo Costa, Pina, you know what I'm talking about. Where else in the world can people of modest means enjoy such an exceptional lifestyle and share that lifestyle with like-minded neighbors who appreciate the small town atmosphere and its size? The Rosen brothers were an exceptional example of American entrepreneurial spirit. They came from a modest, some would say a difficult background. The family was headed by Abraham and Fanny Rosen, Russian Jewish emigres who settled in Baltimore, Maryland. Abraham worked hard, and eventually he was able to purchase a couple of movie theaters in town. But he was a risk taker, and he routinely made and lost considerable wealth. He was in Chicago trying to raise money for a new venture when he was struck and killed by a streetcar. He was just 32. After this, Fanny was left with the chore of raising the 4 children: Edith, Leonard, Jack, and Sylvia. This was during the 1930s Depression. Well, Leonard dropped out of school in the 6th grade. His brother Jack, who was about 4 or 5 years younger than Leonard, later on he attended some college classes at Johns Hopkins. But they were voracious readers. I mean, the boys read 20 to 40 books a year. That's more than I've read in my life, I think. The Rosen brothers made their early fortune the old-fashioned way. They earned it. They began by selling clothes hangers, along with working out of the truck and being like medicine men. Leonard was selling clothes hangers on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, if you can believe that. The same boardwalk that I would walk on 60 years later with one of the last surviving members of the sales team. Their next venture was selling lanolin products on 49th Street in front of a storefront in Manhattan. And that led to the establishment of Charles Antel Cosmetics. It was a widely advertised and highly successful cosmetics company. This gave them the means to eventually establish the Gulf American Corporation and begin what became the largest sales operation in the country. They were salesmen. And they made those characters on that TV program, Mad Men. Anybody ever watch that show? They made them look like 10-year-old girls selling lemonade. They used every conceivable and inconceivable method to get their message across. They gave out coupons at gas stations so people could get free gas all over the country. Dinners at the Playboy Club up in New England. Did you read about that? No. The things they did were amazing. They stopped people on the streets in Europe and pushed the Cape Coral. They had billboards on every road you could think of. They flew them down here on airlines free, set them up in the hotel just to get to sell them the land. Yeah. And thanks to Milt Green, one of the most colorful characters that I ever met, some people actually received a free house at Cape Coral, given away on a TV game show. Did you know that? No. Billy Facilla would love to. I became friends with Milt Green during the production of Castles in the Sun. Once the video was completed, he and his wife invited me up to their summer home in Atlantic City. Milt was the genuine article. He and I strolled to the Taj Mahal, Trump's Taj Mahal in Atlantic City at 2 in the morning. Milt was handing out $20 bills to everyone we passed. They were phony bills, though. On the back, he had printed every job he had ever held since he was a little boy. He just liked to brag about himself, I guess. He was 82 at the time. The next day, the 3 of us drove around Atlantic City And Milt and Marilyn showed me all the places they had been together since grade school. That's where they were from in Atlantic City. At one point we stopped and I videotaped them in front of their grade school. That's funny. And while they reminisced, the school let out, and as the kids made their hasty exit, Marilyn talked about their first encounter. Milt had misbehaved outside, and he was sitting outside the principal's office, enjoying a timeout. She said he was practically a fixture there. She saw him there all the time. That was the start of a lifetime love affair that ended peacefully on August 28, 2010, when Milt passed away at 87. God bless him. It was Milt who first introduced the concept of condominiums in Florida. It was shortly after he moved down here. Well, Milt wasn't the only one on the team with imagination, and I doubt if there was ever a group of individuals with more guts and integrity, except maybe our founding fathers. Maybe I exaggerate a little bit on the integrity part there. But the Rosen brothers team, they knew how to utilize the media, that's for sure. They once invited the producers of that hit television show, Route 66, anybody here remember that? To come down here and film some episodes. They promised that they would food and house the entire cast and crew if they'd come down, and they agreed. They actually filmed 3 episodes here, and I thought so. You really can't recognize any landmarks or anything. They got Hugh Downs. Anybody remember Hugh Downs? They got him to come here and dedicate the team club right here at the Yacht Club in 1962. I mean, they got a lot of celebrities come down here. They filmed a full-length motion picture here in 1965, Fat Spy. I think she mentioned that, and I've got a copy of that too, but you don't want to see it. I mean, you'd rather watch commercials. Phyllis Diller, Brian Donlevy, Jackie Leonard, and Jane Mansfield. I think that was her last movie, or one of the last before she got killed in an accident. The film premiered at Fort Myers, but the theater stopped showing it after 3 days because nobody was buying tickets. And it did just as bad nationwide. That's what I mean, you'd be better off watching commercials. But I bet if the Rosen team was promoting that film, it probably would have done much better, because they were incredible. Like I said, when it came to attracting celebrities to help promote a Florida land development project, no one comes close to these fellows. They even got Bob Hope to come here to dedicate the Garden of Patriots. It was a section of the Rose Gardens where they had busts of past presidents and patriotic figures. Yeah. They presented him with one of himself, and they displayed the other one in the gardens. As a matter of fact, Paul Sanborn, who you mentioned earlier, who turns 90 this week. Today? He was supposed to, he did actually, he drove over to the airport, picked up Bob over at the airport, drove him over here, and he waited with him in the car until Jack and Leonard brought him up to the stage. You can see these busts and other things that were saved when the gardens closed in 1970. They're on display at the Cape Coral Historical Society. Anybody ever been there? On Cultural Park Boulevard. Just look for Ann Coe. She runs it. They do a great job. Got a lot of good stuff there. Paul's heavily involved with it. The Gulf American team, the sales team, was definitely not above reproach. I'm sure most of you have heard about the recent scandals with the NSA and the internet companies spying on people. Cape Coral had its own bugging scandal. At one point, all Cape Coral was talking about was the bugs that had been hidden in the rooms where the salesmen gave their sales pitches to the customers, and the sales manager would listen in. One reason for the bugs was to monitor the salesman to see how well he was doing and how he could improve his technique. But according to one of the salesmen that I interviewed, the real reason was to monitor conversations between the customers, usually a husband and wife, and they were alone. The salesman would leave the room on some pretext, go to the sales manager, and the two of them would listen in on what the couple was saying. The salesman would gain valuable ideas on how to counter any objections they might have to buying property. This isn't much different than Google targeting their advertisers to us when we go browsing on the internet, is it? The salesman that told me this story, another great character, and he lives in town. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years. I hope he's still with us. Frank Holden also recounted a funny incident that he swears is true. I know you didn't read it. You saw it in the video if you watched the video. He swears this is true. It was a beautiful summer day. Not a cloud in the sky. The salesmen were doing their thing in the old Chandler building. That's where the sales offices were. And they weren't actually offices, they were actually cubicles. And everyone could hear what everyone else was saying. Almost like those places you call in India and you're talking to them on the phone, you can hear everybody else. Anyway, Frank and another fellow, they didn't have any customers at the moment. So they were listening in to one of the top salesmen making a pitch to some customers. They were a couple from Georgia. And Frank said they were very religious, not well educated, and he didn't mean any offense by that. A couple from Georgia. Well, the salesman was putting pressure on them. And the man said, well, I believe you, and I think everything's all right. But we don't do anything unless we talk to the Lord. If the Lord don't say we buy it, we won't buy it. So the salesman, being as good as he was and as quick as he was, he reached down into the desk, pulled out a Bible that he had picked up from a motel somewhere, opened it up, put it on the desk, put his hands on the Bible, told the couple to get down on their knees with him so they could talk to the Lord. And they did. So they talked, and he read scripture from this Bible. He was Jewish, which made it kind of funny reading scripture from a Christian Bible. But anyway, this went on for a few minutes, and suddenly there was this tremendous clap of thunder. I mean, I'm sure you people have heard it already. Beautiful sunny day. I mean, my computer, thank God I got backup on it, because the sun could be shining, and all of a sudden, beep, there goes your computer. Out of nowhere, there's all the lightning and thunder. It happens. Anyway, it shook. It was so loud, it shook the building. Well, the salesman jumped up, closed the Bible, put his hands together with the people's hands, and said, the Lord has spoken. Now let's write it up. And he did. And he sold the property. That's a true story, and I nearly fell on the floor laughing before he told it. There were other stories and behavior that were less humorous and more problematic in terms of maintaining a good business reputation. There's a lot of them. And I met some of the people who were not big fans of the Rosens. But all in all, they really were incredible people. It'll never happen again. We just don't have that kind of freedom to do the things they did, and that kind of guts anymore. Anyway, they did have to fight against a lot of negative publicity, and that's where the choice for a public relations manager was crucial in overcoming a boatload of negative publicity. I'd be remiss if I failed to tell you how important the involvement of Connie Mack Jr. was to the overall success of the Cape Coral project. If not for the Rosens' association with Connie Mack Jr., whose reputation for honesty and integrity was well known, it's possible that the Cape Coral project might never have been completed. His position as public relations manager far exceeded that responsibility. I spent some time with his son, former Senator Connie Mack III, at his home on Palm Island. He spoke lovingly about his father, Connie Mack Jr., and his grandfather, Connie Mack Sr., former owner of the Philadelphia Athletics. The senator was extremely enthusiastic in recounting his days as a teenager working for the Rosens. And he expressed great affection for Kenny Schwartz, the general manager, and Eileen Bernard, and our own Paul Sanborn, who at 90 is still actively promoting the Cape. Him and Elmer go around and do it's almost like a comedy bit, two of them. Maybe I'll get the books of that. And he doesn't have to read like I do. The senator stays in touch with all the surviving members. And that's something about these people. They all stay in touch. Linda Sterling still stays in touch with Kenny Schwartz regularly. And Senator Connie Mack stays in touch with the people. They were like a family. It was really, really something. Anyway, I hope I was able to convey to you my admiration and my gratitude to the people who made our lifestyle possible. I think about them every time I kayak beautiful canals down to the river, or I enjoy a cocktail as I watch the breathtaking sunsets. Thank you. I hope I can answer them. I'll have to call on you. The last time I did this, I had to call on Paul, even in the audience. Yes. Any questions? If you have any questions about facts and things, I mean, difficult facts. I'm lucky I remember what year it is. I mean, I start to turn around, I forget which direction I meant to turn. But there are two books that I would recommend, and I got a lot of my information from both of those books. One is the one we mentioned already, Eileen Bernard, and she was incredible. Lies That Came True. And the other one was Selling the Dream by David Dodden. It's chock full of facts. He was a teacher in Cape Coral when he wrote the book. I tried to get him when I was doing the documentary, and even though I got everybody else, everybody who really mattered in the video, his publicist or whatever wasn't interested in having him do an interview. But I got a lot of information from this book, and you'll get a lot of information from it.
Where do you get or see or view this documentary?
Excuse me?
Where do you view the documentary? How can you see it?
Well, you come over my house. Or you could go on castlesinthesun.com and see some of it. And now, don't order it from there because believe me, it's 8 years since I did that documentary, and I just got an order yesterday from someone who put the order. They ordered it online. But if you order it online, especially in Florida, you wind up spending $26. When I do things like this, or when I know people, and you pay full price too, I think. I only charge $10 for it. So if you email me, I'll give you a rebate. If you email me, with your information, I can give you one for $10. With packaging and everything, I can't do it for less than that.
What's your email address?
It's you can get me at Castles in the Sun or Video Transfer Station.
I found it online, Castles in the Sun, and I think, Bill, your email is on there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be good. I had to pay $26. You're going to get a bargain.
Yesterday too, I'm going to lower the price. It's 8 years old now. Yes.
How and when the name was changed from, what was it,
Redfish Point?
Yeah, how did that come about?
Actually, the story about him coming down here is interesting too, because Charles Antel Cosmetics, I think they sold it for about $2 million. And the reason they sold it was because what made them so successful, Charles Antel, was they were one of the first that really blasted the advertising on television at night, because nobody was advertising at night. TV went off at like 6 or 7 o'clock, and there were no shows on, so they used all that time to do advertising. They were one of the first to do that. And Revlon started to encroach on their business, and they were starting to overwhelm Charles Antel, so they decided to sell it. And he also stayed in Punta Gorda at a spa up in Punta Gorda, and he met somebody there who developed Lehigh Acres, and they were talking, and he got interested in selling land down here. So when he got back to Baltimore, I'm making your question a long story, but he sent one of his women down here. She was brilliant too, and I met her when I was doing this, Bernice Freeberg. We bought them all down here. Everyone we could, we brought down here to see the place. Anyway, she was really sharp. And there's a picture of her in Eileen's book. And he sent her down here posing as a customer, not to Cape Coral, but to one of these land development sales places, just to see how they were doing. And she was amazed because they weren't doing anything as far as promoting the places. They were just putting signs out on the road near the developments, and that's about all they were doing, and they were doing well. So one of the salesmen from Charles Antel was in Chicago and saw an ad on TV for some land down in Florida. So he called Baltimore, and he told one of his people there. Leonard got word of it. They got a hold of the commercial, and they watched it in the shipping department at the Charles Antel. And that's what kind of got him hooked on And actually, another guy that I didn't mention, but he's also in the video, and he's in a couple of the books, was Charles Hepner. And he was living in Miramar when I did the video. He was incredible. I mean, he was brilliant. And he died about 2 months after the video came out. Great guy. But he was their marketing genius, among other things. He handled all of that. Redfish Point was the original piece of property that they bought. It was only about 1,700 acres down by the yacht club. That was Redfish Point. And I forget what he paid for it. I think $678,000 they paid for the 1,700 acres at Redfish Point. Little by little, it was owned by the heirs of Alka-Seltzer, Miles Laboratories. Those were Berg, and Rothberg was doing the building under their name, and they would share the profits. 40% went to the Rosens and Gulf American, and the Rottenberg people kept the rest. So they partnered with other people, but basically, no, they didn't do the building.
And how long did they last? When did it end, the company?
It was in the late 60s. It was before 70. In 70, they closed the Rose Gardens because nobody would take it. They tried to sell it to the county, give it to the county. The county wouldn't take it. They tried to give it to the state, and the state wouldn't take it. And it was a beaut. If anyone ever, I've got some video of it when it was in its bloom, and I've got some old stuff. I mean, it was the largest rose gardens, more rose bushes than anywhere in the world. They actually took some of those rose bushes and they put them in the White House garden when Lyndon Johnson was there. They presented them with some bushes from the rose garden. But the maintenance was incredible. And the problem was some of the land was in dispute who really owned it, whether the Cape Coral development people owned it or whether the state owned it. So the state didn't want to get involved with that iffy thing, so they let the whole thing go. The Waltzing Waters, is now, it's up on Route 41 up in North Fort Myers at Shell Factory, I think. I think that's where it is now. But it's still around, the Waltzing Waters fountains.
Another question. Who and how did they name all the streets, places, avenues?
That's a good question, and that's where Milt Mendelsohn, he was a genius. I mean, but Leonard didn't trust him. He respected his intelligence, but he didn't trust Milt because he was afraid Milt would take the company out from under him if he let him. Because he wound up getting arrested years later for some kind of land fraud somewhere, Milt Mendelsohn, and he wound up dying broke, I think. But they said he was half drunk when he did it, but he came up with most of the names for all these streets. Milt Mendelsohn.
He was half drunk. He was.
He was fully drunk.
Yeah.
You know, he had some people, Rosen had some people in his offices up in Baltimore, and I forget what he was talking to some company that was going to invest with him or something, and he sent one of his men up. He took a key out of his pocket. He said, "Here, go get Milt. Unlock him. I got him locked in the closet upstairs. Bring him down here. I want to ask him something." And he said it with a complete straight face. And the people that were sitting there didn't know whether he was. But that's the way he thought of Milt. He didn't trust him beyond where he could see him, because he was brilliant, but he was ambitious, and he didn't trust him. But we wouldn't have these great street names. Anyway, I suggest you buy that book, Selling the Dream. It's a great book, and anyway, that's about all I have really.